The Book of Vishanti. Never heard of it before? Well, it's understandable. It was a well-hidden secret within the Marvel comic fandom before Doctor Strange's Multiverse of Madness. Now, it's a wee little Easter egg that adds all the more depth into our understanding of Doctor Strange, the Time Guardian. People have fought over this book, have gone back in time just to run their fingers through the pages or to feast their eyes on the spells it houses. But what is the Book of Vishanti? Where did it come from, and why is it such a big deal? Stick around, because we're breaking it all down, including how it connects to Doctor Strange and his magical journey. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
All right, book.
What is it? For those who don't have a clue about what I'm talking about, the Book of Vishanti is a spell book from the Doctor Strange series, similar to the Darkhold from the Multiverse of Madness movie. In fact, the Book of Vishanti can be considered the light counterpart of the Darkhold. This stems from the principle embedded during the entire storyline, balance is key. For every light spell that Strange uses to help the multiverse, there is a dark spell to either reverse or corrupt it, as demonstrated by Wanda while under the influence of the Darkhold. The Book of Vishanti contains spells and secrets to life, restoration, healing, and protection. These include antidotes and counter curses to spells and concoctions in the Darkhold. It is mainly owned by the Sorcerer Supreme of the time, which, in this age, would be Dr. Stephen Strange.
Book of Vishanti!
Where did it come from? The Book of Vishanti comes from the Vishanti, a trio of godlike beings from time immemorial. The Vishanti consist of Hogoth, the ancient entity of order, Ashtur, the elder earth god, and Agamotto, the individual known to have been born from the tear of Ashur. The Vishanti were considered to be the defenders of Earth during their time. Agamotto was, ironically, the first ever Sorcerer Supreme and the author of the Book of Vishanti. He also made the Eye of Agamotto, which housed the Time Stone until later events. This was found by the priests of a Babylonian god named Marduk, which then appointed a griffin to guard it until the Ancient One went back in time to defeat the griffin and earn the book and shared it with Strange. The first owner of the book was a sorcerer named Varn, who served under Thulsa Doom, a man the Book of Vishanti deemed to be part of the proper elder race and could possibly be part of the elder gods, as he was part of one of the last of the pre-human races. Eventually, he became part of the Darkholders and the first ever to be corrupted by the Darkhold, turning into a vampire down the line. Isn't it ironic for the owner of the Book of Vishanti to turn into a vampire after all of that? History of the Book of Vishanti. Even though the book was so powerful in its own right, several other members of the Masters of the Mystic Arts were convinced it was a fairy tale. Only the Sorcerer Supreme was confirmed of the book's existence through a book passed on from one Supreme to the next. However, the location was unknown to the Supremes, as it was hidden in a dimension that the Supremes didn't know existed. It was Christine who led Stephen and America to the Gap Junction dimension in Earth 199999, where most of the events of the MCU take place. Unfortunately, those efforts were thwarted later when Wanda caught them while dreamwalking and destroyed the book. What can this book do? The possibilities are endless. The Book of Vishanti was able to grant a sorcerer anything they desired to vanquish their enemy. As stated before, the Book of Vishanti was the antithesis of the Darkhold and, as stated by Carl Mordo, can resist its dark, corrupted, and corroded magic. It would have been a possible perfect match for Wanda, but she managed to burn it to ashes before anything could be done. begun. The Book of Vishanti can also be considered a monster manual of sorts. Along with being a never-ending repository of spells, it works as an antidote and reference guide for any kind of villain. This includes the vampire-eradicating Montesi formula and even chronicles the history of the infamous Baron Mordo, along with divulging to the reader the many secrets in the Darkhold. Events before the MCU relating to the Book of Vishanti. Alright, let's zero in on the Book of Vishanti for a second, because this thing has been at the center of some major magical drama. First up, Kalu. He used to be tight with the Ancient One, kinda like his right-hand man, and even trained along Strange. But then he dipped, voluntarily exiled himself to the dimension of Ragador, casual, and later came back with a vengeance. His target? Yup, the Book of Vishanti. So what does he do? Steals the book straight from Strange, and instead of just using it recklessly, Kalu becomes a full-on spell nerd. Like, he studies everything in it. Every spell, every counterspell, just completely obsessed. And once he's soaked it all in, he gives it back. But not to Strange. Oh no, he returns it to some ancient Babylonian priests, which, of course, sends Strange and the Ancient One on another mission to get it back all over again. Meanwhile, Kalu is now prepped with all the knowledge he needs to wreak havoc on Earth. But in true tag team fashion, Strange and the Ancient One shut that down real quick, banishing him to limbo for good. No heaven, no hell, just nothing. Rough ending, but hey, at least he went down as one of the top dark sorcerers of his time. Next, we've got Asmodeus, not the demon, but the leader of a culty group called the Sons of Satanish, who basically worship an actual demon called Satanish, because why not? Their plan? Inscribe the spell of fire and ice into the Book of Vishanti and summon two ridiculous beings, Mimir, the frost giant, and Surta, the fire demon from Muspelheim, basically the Norse version of hell. Thankfully, Strange had a backup plan. He set up a magical tripwire spell that would teleport the book straight to the Ancient One if anyone tried messing with it. Smart move. But before Asmodeus died, he uttered one last spell with his dying breath, and bam, Ymir and Surta were unleashed. Way to leave on a dramatic note. Luckily for Earth, specifically Earth 199999, Strange called in the Avengers to handle that mess. Because, yeah, ancient magic and interdimensional fire demons? Definitely an Avengers-level threat. And finally, Loki. Yep, that Loki. Our favorite green-cloaked trickster actually had his own run-in with the Book of Vishanti. This all went down during the time when magic on Earth was basically getting wiped out by a villain named the Imperator, who believed science should rule over all magic. After that whole disaster, the Book of Vishanti did something totally unexpected. It chose Loki to be the next Sorcerer Supreme, and Strange? He couldn't fight it. He had to hand over all his magical gear, cloak, Eye of Agamotto, and even the Book of Vishanti itself to Loki. Wild, right? Of course, in classic Loki fashion, this was a ruse planned by the god of mischief. He had planned out this elaborate illusion to make Strange believe he was the next Sorcerer Supreme to make his next move. What was it, you wonder? Well, have you heard of the exile of Sing Soon? Well, turns out that's a spell that allows you to absorb all the magic present in a specific area. Sounds like mischief, right? That's exactly what Loki did. Suck out all the magic remaining in the world in an attempt to restore the magic levels to its former levels. He claimed it was to make sure Earth, or Midgard in Asgardian terms, would be able to defend itself from future threats, such as the War of the Realms, which happened and pretty much caused havoc for Asgard itself, forget Midgard. Hell on Earth in Las Vegas, that was technically on Hydra, but Loki involved himself in it too. The bringing together of the Infinity Stones, we all know how that went down, and the Celestials' final host, and we don't talk about that. What even is in the Book of Vishanti? You may be wondering at this point just what kind of contents are in the Book of Vishanti. How powerful is it actually? Is it as great as I'm saying, or am I just exaggerating? Well, let's get into the nitty-gritty as to what we can find in the book. The book consists of over 8,000 pages, excluding the 23 appendices that were added in by various Sorcerers Supreme over the years. The first 200 pages consist of histories and the knowledge of artifacts that would guide a sorcerer through their journey, including entries about the Eye of Agamotto. It also talks about the past and future Sorcerer Supremes and chronicles most of the Ancient One's life. The first spell itself allows you to read the spells in a language understandable to your mind. It quotes, "By the hoary hosts of Hogoth, of the Vishanti's bright glow, may these words form sound and meaning for those within magic's flow." Alright, so flipping through pages 201 to 400 of the Book of Vishanti, that's where things really start to get juicy. This chunk dives deep into the backstories of some major villains in the timeline, like Dormammu and Kalu, giving full-on dossiers that any self-respecting sorcerer should definitely study up on. It even covers Strange's Ride or Die, Wong, the OG Vishanti trio who created the book, plus wild realms like the Dream Dimension, the Death Dimension, and characters like Demonicus, Adria, and Clea. Honestly, if I had access to even one of those spells, I'd be zapping out of awkward moments in real life like, poof, you didn't see me. Then, from pages 601 to 799, things get even darker, with names like Satanish and Yandroth popping up. By the time you hit pages 800 to 999, we're talking Wundagore Mountain, Stonehenge, the infamous spell of fire and ice, and even Death herself, making a creepy little cameo on page 989. No big deal, right? Now, the real heavy hitters show up between 1000 to 2000. We've got names like Chthon, Mephisto, and Dr. Doom strutting onto the magical stage, and yes, Agatha Harkness, the one who had it all along, gets her shout out too, from pages 1900 to 1906. But the biggest mic drop? Page 1999. That's where the book spills the tea on the Darkhold's secrets, including the Montesi formula, the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans, and something called the Legacy of Elphick. Pages 2001 to 3000 bring up relics and retell history, the famed gathering of fear with villains like Nightmare and Kalaku, and the Infinity Stones mentioned. All this is packaged in pages 2014 to 2021. Pages 2022 to 2027 are all about relics like the Hand of the Vishanti, the Crimson Gem of Sitorak, and the Oculus of Ouroboros. Pages 2342 talks about the group spell of Dimension Reversal, and 2343 is about Empirical. Pages 3001 to 3999 mention threats from Asgard, those threats specifically being the Enchantress and Loki, and the forged weapons of Doctor Strange, including his sword, amulet, and gauntlet. Pages 4000 to 8000 are all about complicated spells and complex magics, including techniques on astral projection and spells on mass illusions. As for those appendixes I mentioned, potions and magic again, transmogrification of fire, the elixir of Otkid, everything is in those appendixes. How cool is that? Another thing is the rite of apotheosis, which turns a man into a god with godlike powers, but it's only possible if said man has 500 million acolytes. Oof, I bet politicians would be running to get their hands on this power, especially a specific orange man. Darkhold versus Book of Vishanti. Which one is stronger? The Book of Vishanti and the Darkhold are opposites of each other. One gives you dark, corrupting magic that consumes you with a consciousness if you allow it, or give in to the temptation of it. The other one is a book with the consciousness of three people, superior sorcerers and gods alike, that gives you literally anything you need to squash your enemy, be it a spell or a potion. It is the concentration of pure, good, selfless magic that is at your beck and call at all times. However, when the need arises, which one is more powerful? The Darkhold is, in a literal sense, the book of the devil. It houses the evil elder god Cthulhu's spells and history that he himself wrote into indestructible scrolls. Once they were bound together in a book, that is what we call the Darkhold. He left them behind as a reminder of his power and influence, along with allowing the lucky sorcerer or two to stumble upon it and use it. The Darkhold also gets its name from the place of conception, Wundagore Mountain, also known as the Darkhold. The Book of Vishanti, however, is written by sorcerers and similar elder beings that had fought and won against those corrupted by the influence of the Darkhold. While it doesn't have as much of an influence as the Darkhold does, it helps, if not more. If the Darkhold is like a voice in your head, the Book of Vishanti functions as a guiding hand on your shoulder. The only downside is that the spells can only be used for defense, not offense, really setting unrealistic standards here for future generations. So which one is functionally stronger? Well, let me answer that with another question. On what grounds would you measure the strength of both grimoires? Would it be on the grounds of spells, effectiveness, protection? All of that would count on how you're using the magic. I don't mean in the sense of good versus bad, but how effectively and with what kind of understanding you're utilizing the spells in the books. A sorcerer with the Darkhold can fight a sorcerer with the Book of Vishanti, but if there isn't an understanding of the Book of Vishanti, there is no point in having the tome with you. If we're looking into physical capabilities, then sure, the Book of Vishanti can physically block dark magic, even with the levels of the Darkhold. This can be questioned because Wanda had decimated the Book of Vishanti and turned it into ashes, but that was only because she had a much deeper understanding of the Darkhold compared to Strange and the Book of Vishanti. Currently, even though the physical Darkhold has been destroyed in the place it was conceived, it's said to have been fused into the flesh of the Scarlet Witch, bringing in the most thorough kind of corruption to be found in the history of the masters of the mystic arts. Extra tidbits. So, who remembers the Skrulls from Secret Invasion? Well, turns out they've been around for long enough for the Book of Vishanti to create a spell about them. They've been pulling their shenanigans for long enough that even an ancient spell book was like, nope, they have to be stopped. The spell of Tartashi did just that, and Strange managed to find Skrulls posing as the Avengers before defeating them with a one-hit wonder. Now, remember how I mentioned Asmodeus wanted to inscribe the spell of fire and ice on the Book of Vishanti? Well, turns out you can delete or destroy spells too. Of course, only with the Vishanti's approval. Technically, this turned out to be a good thing. Otherwise, who knew what kind of spells would have turned that pure book into another Darkhold? For those of you who are thinking, oh, so this book only grants good things to sorcerers, think again, because Strange did suffer nastily from the book. When he was younger, he tried to use the Vampiric Verses spell to revive his younger brother, but it backfired and turned him into a vampire instead. Marvelous verdict. So this is it, folks. The Book of Vishanti in all of its glory. This book is something out of a fairy tale and a horror tale as well. A book with only good spells and filled with magic that contained the souls of old sorcerers that judge you with every spell you cast and every word you try to scribe into the book. Count me out. What do you think? Would owning the Book of Vishanti motivate you to become the Sorcerer Supreme? And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe out there. Thanks, everyone.